Give me a second, a very, very little second. All right. There you are. Very good. We're about to, okay, there you are. We are live. Okay, so thank you very much, okay, for all of you to have joined me. As I told you, it's a pleasure to be with you. And let's start, all right, with our excursus on the second and the third task of the speaking section. As I told you, that is exactly what we're going to be discussing, all right? So as you can see, here we are. Here we have the slides we're going to be reading today and discussing as well. So let's start with this. All right, so just a quick summary of what we saw last week about the general aspects of the section. Let me start here. If you remember, I told you, right? There are 4 different tasks in this section. And to this point, we have just seen the first one, that is the independent task. Now, if you remember, I also talked about how I said that in this section, although we have 4 different tasks, we just have 2 types of questions. The first type of question, as you can see, is called independent question. And the second type of question is called integrated question. The independent question is a type of question you will just find on the first task of the speaking section that we have discussed and practiced last week. Nonetheless, the second type of question that, as I say, is called integrated question, you're going to find that in the second, the third, and the fourth task of the speaking section. Of course, if you think about it, all this type of questions and all these tasks in the speaking section are very similar. That is to say, all of them basically follow the same instructions and the same template. But anyways, we're going to discuss them individually, all right? So as you can see, we're just going to discuss a new type of question that is called integrated speaking question, okay? Now, basically the rest of the information here is going to be repeated. As you know, you have to take your notes. Now, actually, if you think about what we were practicing last week, we actually didn't take notes, right? But now you're going to see how important, taking notes turn out to be, right? That is to say that taking notes is going to turn out to be super important because in this case, you're going to trust me, in this case, you're going to be needing desperately to take notes because you are not going to be able to remember all the overwhelming content you're going to receive in this task. And therefore, you will need to find some sort of mechanism in order for you to remember information, even when you're just able to listen and to read to the information you're going to have once. But let us get into it more specifically, okay? So as you can see, here we are, the task number 2 of the speaking section. And this is called, as I told you, integrated speaking task, okay? The second, the third, and the fourth are all of them called integrated speaking tasks, all right? So let us discuss this one, the second one. So for this task, dear students, you will be reading a short written passage that is 80 to 100 words long, all right? This is the first thing that is going to happen. In this case, for example, if you remember the first task of the speaking section, the only thing we have to read was the super brief statement or topic that ETS gave us in order for us to respond to that topic in our response, right? Nonetheless, in this case, we are not going to be reading such a short and tiny passage. Now we're going to be reading a more consistent passage of 80 to 100 words. This is the first thing we're going to do. And this is very important. Why? Because this reading passage that you're going to read is actually the first information source that you're going to receive in this task. And if you, for example, are wondering if there are more information sources that you will have to read or to listen, yes, actually for this task, you will have to receive information from 2 different information sources. The first one, as I say, is this reading passage, okay? And this reading passage, you will have to read it. It's a very short passage anyways, don't worry, it's not too long. It's 80 to 100 words. So as I say, the first information source you're gonna receive is gonna be this reading passage. You're gonna have to read it, and right after you read this passage, you will have to listen to a conversation on the same topic you have read about, right? So let me, for example, comment on what is going to be the topic or let's say the theme of this reading passage you're going to be reading. For this task, dear students, the topic or the theme of the reading passage is going to be an announcement about a change happening to a campus, for example, as a shift in class schedules or a new bus service. Basically, any activity or let's say something like a change or event that could be taking place on a campus, that is to say, in a university, that is a likely topic you're going to receive. That is to say, anything that could take place in a university, a change in services, change in schedules, change in, I don't know, in activities, in students' activities, that is something that, well, could be the topic of your reading passage. As I say, your reading passage is going to be about something very, very trivial and daily. It's going to be about something happening on a campus in a university, all right? That is going to be the first information source you're going to receive. Immediately after, you will be listening to a conversation regarding the same announcement, okay? As I say, the second information source you're going to receive is going to be a conversation, of course, a recorded conversation. You're going to listen to it. And this conversation is going to be about the same topic you read about. So, for example, if in the written passage you read about, let's say, a change in the bus service, then the conversation you listen right after you have finished to read is going to be of two persons, of two students, of course, in this case, discussing the same topic, the change in the bus service. They are going to be discussing exactly what you have read about. Now, one of the speakers will be expressing their personal opinion about the news. As I say, in this conversation, of course, you're going to have two different speakers. One of them is going to be called the main speaker, all right? And the second one is basically a complementary speaker. The main speaker, as you can read here, is going to be expressing his or her opinion about the change or the events that you have read about in the written passage. He's going to be expressing his or her opinion, as I say, and very interestingly, he's also going to be delivering some arguments or reasons he has for holding the opinion he is sustaining or postulating. Something very interesting, because if you remember, it is exactly what you did also in the first task of the speaking section, right? Because you presented your opinion about a topic and then you offer some reasons you had in order to hold that particular opinion, right? You offer some reasons why was it that you were convinced about that particular position. And this is exactly the experience that you're gonna get in this case. But now you are not going to be speaking about your own opinions or your own arguments. Now you're going to listen to another person, in this case, as I say, the main speaker, expressing his or her opinion and also delivering some reasons that he has for holding that opinion, all right? And now maybe you're wondering, what do I have to do with these both information sources? Well, very simple. Your job in this particular task is simply to summarize both information sources, to summarize both materials. That is to say, the reading passage and also the listening passage. That, as I say, is a conversation. You don't have to do anything else. You simply have to summarize both topics. Now, if you look at your screen, you're going to see that on this slide, I have pasted the picture of a journalist, right? And here the picture of a journalist is placed to remember you that when you are performing on this type of question, an integrated question in the speaking section, you need to remember that basically you're going to be working as a journalist. Why? Because remember, what does a journalist do? Normally, I mean, in his or her work, what do? Well, they basically look for information in some information sources they receive, right? And what they do with that information they receive from different information sources is to take notes, right? To take notes of those information sources in order to, of course, receive and to save the information. And after they take notes on that information, they make a summary, right? They make a summary of the information they have managed to gather in order to present that summary to their audience. And that is exactly what you're going to be doing. Now, notice that a good journalist never gives his or her opinion about the topic, right? That is to say, he doesn't alter, he doesn't change or vary the content of the information he has received. He doesn't go about writing summaries that that have changed the information he received. No, he respects the information and he merely summarizes the information just as he received it. That is to say, you don't have to add your personal opinion. You don't have to add, in this case, in your response, external information that could, for example, affect or vary the content that you have received in these information sources. But the only thing you have to worry about, as I say, is to summarize, okay? Is summarizing the information just as you receive it. That's it. No more than that. In your response, I'm going to show you, of course, some examples and a template for you to do it. But basically, what you're going to be doing in your response is to summarize the reading passage you have read, and also the conversation you listened to. That is to say, you're going to summarize the opinion of the main speaker, and you're going to, of course, summarize the reasons or the motives that he has given in order to support his or her opinion. That's it. No more than that. Remember, you have to be like a journalist. Never offer in this response your own opinion. In this case, you are not required nor actually allowed to give your opinion, nor you have to mention any information that is external to the material you are receiving. You don't have to mention, for example, I don't know, information that has not been talked about or discussed in the reading passage or the conversation. Never mention it. As I say, it is not your task to add or to complement the material, but merely summarizing it, okay? This is what you have to do. Now, of course, there is also a variation in the timing you will have for this task. So let me show you. Let us read this together. So how much time are you going to have for reading the written passage? Well, the following. You're going to have in total 4 or 5 seconds in order to read the written passage, as I say, okay? 4 or 5 seconds. Now, in order to listen to the conversation right afterwards, you're going to have 1 minute, okay? The conversation is not going to last for more than 1 minute, okay? That is what I mean. Now, thirdly, you're going to have, okay, 30 seconds in this case, after you have received both materials, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response. If you notice, it is more time than before, right? Because in the last task we have discussed, you just had, how much? 15 seconds, right? In order to prepare your response. In this case, you have 30. And now, in order to deliver your response, as I told you, it's going to be a summary of both materials. You will not have 45 seconds as in the past. This time you will have 60 seconds, that is to say 1 minute, right? So as you can see, the timing is changing. Of course, as they know you're gonna need more time in this case in order to summarize 2 materials, they are giving you more time in order to include all that summary within the response, all right? This is what you have to do, all right? Of course, let me show you some examples, and through those examples, you're going to understand way better, trust me. So let's get into some examples, right? Before we start with our, well, before I give you the template, because tomorrow we're going to practice, but nonetheless, today we're going to see all the theoretical aspects. So let's see what we have here, all right? There is somebody who's just joining. Well, for those of you who are just joining, dear students, we are now discussing the second task of the speaking section. I have already given, well, a summary of what you have to do. Basically, just in order to repeat for those of you who are just joining, in this section, you have to listen to 2 information sources, a reading passage, and then a conversation. And then you have to create a summary of both materials so that in your responses, as you can see, for example, you're going to have 60 seconds in order to include and to deliver your response. You have to make a summary of both information sources, as I say, a reading passage and then a conversation or listening passage. In your response, you simply have to summarize both topics or both materials. No more than that, okay? If you want to have more understanding, you can rewatch this class or you can pay attention to this one. That is, as I say, the illustration. Okay, so let us read. I know that with this illustration, you're going to be able to understand way clearer. So let me show you an illustration of this particular task, okay? The integrated task of the speaking section. So let's see what we have here, dear students, all right? So as I told you, the first thing you're going to be receiving is a reading passage, right? This reading passage, as I told you, is not going to be more than 80 to 100 words. So let's see an instance. So this would be a very similar reading passage to the ones you're going to receive on the exam. As you can see, it's not long. It's super, super short. It's super reduced, right? So as you can see, let us read what it says. In this case, I'm going to be reading aloud for us to understand together. But nonetheless, of course, on the exam, you have to read by yourself. And as I told you, how much time you're going to have in order to read this? You're going to have, if you remember, 45 seconds, right? 45 seconds to read. There's going to be a chronometer. I'm going to show you later on the simulator for you to clarify all doubts or hesitations. But nonetheless, as I say, 45 seconds to read this passage. So let us read it together in this occasion. Let's see. It says, the university is planning to offer free Spanish courses this trimester. Due to an influx of exchange students from Spain and Latin America, starting this trimester, the university will be offering free Spanish language tuition for interested parties. Participation in these courses is limited, however, and preference will be given to those students taking part in activities directly related to the exchange program. Go to the university website for further details, right? As you can see, and as I told you, this reading passage is not about something academic or something like that. No, it's merely about an event taking place in a university. In this case, it's a new course that the university is offering, right? As you can see, it is a course with regard to, well, to Spanish courses, right? And we are reading that they are planning to offer some free tuitions to a limited quantity of students who decide to take part of these classes, right? And they are saying that these classes are going to be preferably for people who are related to these exchange programs existing at the university. Now, here, that will be the reading passage. And as I say, you have 4 or 5 seconds to read. So after you read this, then you're going to listen to, as I told you, the second information source. And what is going to be that? A conversation. Let us listen to the conversation for this particular topic. Now, here is what, as I told you, your skills in taking notes are going to be very important, dear students. Why? Because as I told you, you're going to listen to a conversation. And you're going to listen to this conversation just once. Therefore, you will be needing what? Well, your notes, right? Because as you're going to listen to this conversation once, of course that you're not going to be able to remember everything. So please grab a piece of paper nearby you and also take a pencil or a pen and write down some notes, of course, as I have taught you in the past when we were discussing, I think, the listening section. Write down some notes, all right, in order for you to remember the information you're going to be listening to, all right? So please grab a piece of paper, grab a pencil, and start writing down your notes on that paper so that you can help me and then, well, of course, you can comprehend my response right after we listen to this conversation, okay? So let us listen to the conversation together. Let's go.
Now listen to 2 students discussing the Spanish classes.
What do you think about the Spanish courses the university is offering?
I'm not sure. I mean, last semester they did the same thing with an IT course and it was booked out within 10 minutes of the registration from going online.
You think it'll be the same for this?
Well, yeah. Spanish is a popular language to learn, and look at what it says about the preferences given. There are going to be loads of students who fit the bill for preferential access.
Well, I'm going to give it a look anyway. I might get lucky.
Sure. To be honest, I think it would be better if they didn't make the course free. A lot of people will sign up just because they don't have to pay anything, then not turn up to half of the classes. If you have to pay for something, you're more likely to use it.
I'm not sure. I mean, this way it's accessible even to poorer students.
I guess so. I suppose I'm still annoyed that I couldn't do the IT course last semester. I really needed the chance to brush up on my computing skills.
All right, very good. So there are 2 things that I wanted to remark with regard to this conversation we have just listened to. The first thing is that if you notice, as I told you, the conversation doesn't last more than 1 minute, all right? So that is not going to be a huge worry. Now, second thing, if you listen to the conversation very carefully, then you notice that there are 2 types of speakers, right? As I told you, there is a main speaker and there is a complementary speaker. The main speaker in this case is obviously the female student, right? Because she is the one who is delivering her opinion and also giving some reasons why she holds that particular opinion. Now, the male student in this case, he is the complementary student. Why is the complementary speaker? I'm sorry. Why is he the complementary speaker? Because if you listen to the conversation, you notice that the complementary speaker was merely remarking, or let's say responding or reacting to the arguments and reasons that the main speaker offered. He said things like, oh, yeah, that's true, but I'm not sure, right? Because they had this British accent. But he was merely remarking things. Oh, yeah, that's true. Oh, are you sure? Right? Things of that sort, right? But he never talked about his opinion, or he never offered arguments for, I don't know, defending or sustaining the opinion he has. Never. So why do I mention this? The reason why I'm trying to clarify this and to make emphasis on this is because when you are responding, okay, to the question, you need to summarize and to focus your response on what the main speaker said instead of what the complementary speaker said. As I say, your focus, your emphasis must be on the main speaker, not on the secondary speaker, okay? So please remember that. I'm going to explain that further, but have it on your mind that your response should be centering or focusing on the main speaker and not on the secondary speaker. Think about it. I mean, the secondary speaker actually didn't offer anything relevant to the conversation. All the relevant information was mentioned by who? Well, by the main speaker, by the female, the student, right? But now, let us listen to my response that I recorded for this particular information sources, and you're going to be able to see and to listen, of course, how should you respond to this type of questions. So let me return to our presentation here, and let us get into, as I say, my response. So let me open this, and let's listen to the response I recorded for this particular question. Let's listen, okay? As I told you, please pay attention to how I respond. Try to notice maybe some patterns in my response, how so that I'm, well, prefacing my response, how I'm concluding my response, what phrases or structures I use as connectors. Try to listen to all those details, okay? Try to perceive. So let us listen to what I responded to this question. Let's see. In the reading passage, we observe that the university wants to offer free Spanish courses since next trimester to all students, but especially to those who are engaged with exchange programs. On the other hand, we also observe a student who disagrees with this modality because she considers that just as it happened with the IT classes, so many people, just because the courses are free, are going to register and many students are going to stay out of the lessons. She also considers that given that Spanish is a very popular language, many students will also be super interested in learning this language and many people will simply stay out of the lessons. She also considers that the university should make these courses not free but pay, and that way just the students who are really interested in these courses will take part of them and not just the students who, because the courses are free, get into. And there you are. So if you notice, dear students, there are some things that I want to remark about my response. First of all, if you notice, I center all my attention on the main speaker, right? I just talked about what the female student said and what was her opinion. Of course, I summarized the reading passage as well. I'm going to show you that. But nonetheless, with regard to the conversation, my main focus and let's say emphasis was on the main speaker, what the female student said, how she presented some arguments. And second thing I wanted to remark, if you notice in my entire response, the only thing I was doing was to summarize. I never said if I agree with this student, if I, for example, found her arguments not very convincing, I never said something like that. The only thing I, let's say, limited myself to do was to summarize. And that is exactly the thing I do have to, let's say, well, you have to copy, okay? And not from me, from the let's say from the picture that I posted here, because I'm trying to be like a journalist. As I told you, I think this is a very good time to identify this task with the work, or let's say with the activity that journalists normally do. That is to say, they simply listen to information, they gather information, they take notes on that, and they prepare a summary. And their summary is always very trustworthy and basically very much loyal to the information, just as they have received it. They try to, well, avoid any corruption of the content. They try to, well, they try to avoid any modification because they want their audience to receive the information just as it was presented to them, right? So as I say, try to pay attention to those details. Now, before we get into the template for this section, let me show you one more example, right? So let's come back here and let's see what we have as a second illustration. So let's see. Right, I have it here. Let me open this. It's right here. Okay, so now let us read this new passage. Remember, this is always the order in which you're going to receive the information sources. Reading passage, and then the conversation, all right? So let us read together. Remember, 45 seconds to read this. Now, it says, the campus fitness center will permanently close at the end of this semester. This decision was made by the university administration in coordination with representatives of the Students' Association. Unfortunately, the building currently housing the center is very old, and the university can no longer afford the cost of maintaining it or providing heat and air conditioning as required. Furthermore, the popularity of the center has declined since the university formed partnerships with several private fitness centers in the city. These partnerships mean that all full and part-time students can access 5 privately owned gyms across the city at no cost. There you are. So as you can see, there are students, this would be the reading passage. As I told you, very similar to the ones that you're going to receive on the actual exam, all right? So remember, as you can see, it's a very daily and trivial topic. It's just about a change they are trying to make in the university because they want to get rid of this fitness center. Well, and they're giving some arguments because they say it's too unsafe and unsecure to proceed having this place as a valid and active gym or fitness center. And we also want to, of course, allow our students to go to these privately owned gyms across the city. So they are, well, basically arguing all these reasons in favor of the change they want to make, right? Now, after you read this, you have to listen to the conversation on the same topic, okay? So please let us listen together to a conversation of 2 speakers discussing exactly the same topic we have read about. So let's see what we have here in this conversation. As I say, please, very important, dear students, for you to take your notes on this because you need to compare your response or how you have responded to this with my response I'm going to show you later, okay? So let us listen to the conversation on the same topic.
What do you think about this announcement?
To be honest, I'm completely opposed to the plan.
Really? Why?
Because shutting down the fitness center isn't really going to save much money. I mean, sure, the building is really old, but even if it isn't used on a regular basis, the school still has to maintain it. They have to make sure it is safe and that it doesn't become a fire hazard or something like that.
I didn't think about that.
Right, and even tearing the building down will be expensive because of all the construction workers they'll have to hire. Plus, once it's gone, we're going to need to replace it with something new, so we shouldn't shut down the gym just to save money.
You make a good point.
And it's not like all the students can easily use the gyms in the city. The closest one is a 30-minute drive from school. How are people who live in dorms on campus supposed to reach them if they don't have their own car?
You know, I took a taxi to one of the gyms and it cost nearly $20. I can't afford to pay that much money every time I want to exercise.
Exactly. And even if you can afford to pay for a taxi, it will be really challenging to get one if you want to exercise late at night. I don't think that was really considered when the decision to close the fitness center was made.
There you are. Okay, so as you can see, in this conversation, it's also very much noticeable how that there are 2 types of speakers, right? A main speaker and a complementary speaker, right? Because in this case, the male student is the one who is offering his opinion, sustaining it with some reasons, arguments, and the other speaker, the female one, is simply remarking, right? Oh, that you are making a good point, right? Expressions like that one. And as I say, she's basically adding no positive nor relevant information to the conversation. But the male student in this case is the one who is offering all the valuable content we are going to need in our response later on. Okay, so as I say, always pay attention to the main speaker, right? Because that is the one that you're going to be summarizing in your response. Now, let us listen to the response that I proposed for this particular exercise. And as I say, now that you have listened to one response previously, try to identify what are those phrases that I'm repeating, how is it that I'm organizing my response, what phrases I am maybe including at the middle of my response or at the end. So please try to catch all these details so that you can understand the template very much easily when I show it to you right after we finish with this second instance or illustration, okay? So please let us listen to my response on this second exercise. Let's see. To begin with, we have seen in the reading passage that the university plans to close the campus fitness center permanently because they consider that nobody uses it and because they consider that students can go to the private gyms that they have hired across the city, and also because the maintenance costs for this fitness centers are too high for the university. On the other hand, we have seen that a student disagrees with this because he considers that this is not going to save money. The university will still have to maintain the buildings, and maybe these buildings are going to provoke a fire, and that is going to cost a lot of money. He also considers that if they want to demolish it, they will have to pay workers, and that is also going to cost a lot of money. He also considers that the alternative gyms are not easily reached by other students because they are far away from the university, they are too expensive, and many people who work out by night will not be able to find a taxi. There you are. Fantastic. So if you notice then, basically my structure is I start summarizing the reading passage, then I move on to, well, summarize what the speaker or the main speaker said in the conversation. And now let me show you the template I am using, all right? Here you have it. This is a template I was using. If you notice, this is exactly what I was always following in my responses. So here we have also 2 steps. Let me here modify something. I want to add here to the response as well. Where is it here? So as I tell you, it is very interesting that if you think about it, the second speaker or the main speaker in this case is basically repeating, let's say, the exercise that you've been doing in the first task, right? Because he's expressing his opinion, and he is also defending it, right? Defending it. So if you notice, basically there is a pattern. As I told you, this is a very repetitive exam, and they don't even bother themselves to create a new, let's say, experience or a new scenario. They are repeated the same, exactly the same activity or task that you did in the first task. Now they are forcing other people to do it. That is to say, they are making or creating conversations so you can listen to them, but they are exactly the same that you have already been doing, right? So very good. Now let me show you here the template. Very good, dear students. Here you have. So if you notice, my first step is this one. I always say at the beginning an introductory phrase like this one to begin with in the reading passage, right? And then comes whatever the passage says. And by the passage, I mean the reading passage. As I told you, the first part or the first information source that I summarize in my response is the reading passage. In this case, well, we read about in the article that was telling us that the university has decided to, of course, tear down this particular building because all the reasons we have listed, right? So, as I say, this is the introductory phrase to begin with in the reading passage, and then you summarize, okay? Remember, very concisely and very, of course, clearly what the reading passage said. Now, after you finish your summary, okay, of the reading passage, you have to move on to the second step. The second step starts like this. On the other hand, right, you are opposing, you are contrasting what the reading passage said with what the conversation said. So this is a very important connector. On the other hand, right, and then it comes what the conversation is about. So for example, it could be, on the other hand, we have listened to 2 students discussing their opinion about the subject, right? And then the rest of the summary or the response is merely, as I told you, focusing on the main speaker. What was the first main speaker's reason for holding the opinion he has, and the second main speaker's reason for holding, as well as I say, the opinion he has, right? It's simply that, if you notice, that is the template or that is the structure. The first step to begin with in the reading passage, and here you make your summary of the reading passage. Then second step, on the other hand, and then you summarize the conversation very generally. And the third and the fourth step are basically for you to summarize the specific arguments the main speaker is delivering for sustaining his or her opinion. Now, maybe you are wondering, in which particular summary should I spend more time? Summarizing the reading passage or summarizing the conversation? My response is this one. You should actually spend more time summarizing what the conversation said. That is to say, summarizing the main speaker's reason, etc., not spending more time on the reading passage. Why? Let me tell you. Because, of course, it is easier to remember what the reading passage said, right? Because you had it there on your screen, and you also could, simply copy what you saw, and that could be your summary of the reading passage. Nonetheless, the reviewer is well aware that you're just able to listen to the conversation once. Therefore, of course, he knows it's more difficult to include a more detailed and specific information with regard to the listening, right? To the listening passage, that is to say, to the conversation, right? So as you can see, dear students, that's it. Always spend more time and focus your response, emphasize your response on the conversation, all right? I don't like to say time. I don't like, for example, saying 20 seconds in the reading passage and 40 seconds in the listening, because when I say that, my students always try to meet or to reach those times instead of responding adequately and efficiently. So as I say, decide by yourself how much time you're going to invest on each particular summary, but nonetheless, as I say, pay more attention or emphasize and dedicate more time to the summary you're going to make of the conversation. Okay, that's it. Now, is there any question, dear students, about the structure or anything that I have talked about until this point? Please tell me. I'm going to be delighted to help you. Questions? Clarifications? Yes, Paulina, please.
Teacher, when we are reading the passage and then we are listening the passage, we can see also the reading again or not?
Oh, no. When you read the passage, let me show you. Very good question. Let me show you here in my simulator. I'm going to open it here. So let me show you exactly how it's going to look like on the exam. So here, custom and speaking task number 2, answer in here. So let me show you. So when you come to the second task, the first thing you're going to be reading, as I say, is the, well, or are some instructions, right? They tell you what to do, but anyways, you don't need to pay attention to this because you know what you have to do, right? That is the reason why you're taking these classes. Now, nonetheless, the first thing you're going to read is, well, a set of instructions for you to know what you're going to be doing on this task. Now, after you read this, of course, the computer is going to take you automatically to this one, to this menu. So here, for example, you have, as I told you, the reading passage. Here is, well, this is a very, very tiny summary, let's say, of or context or background of the reading passage you're going to be reading. For example, if you read, it says, the campus radio station, is considering a change to its programming. Read an article in the university newspaper about the possible change. You have 4 or 5 seconds to read the article. Begin reading now. As you can see, it's a very summarized and concise background or context of what you're about to read, right? Now, as you can see here below those instructions or that very brief context or background for your reading passage, you have the reading passage. As you can see, it is not long, right? It's just 80 to 100 words. Now, when you finalize this or when you get into this menu, dear students, there's going to be a chronometer like this one. But the chronometer, instead of going upwards, is going to be going downwards. That is to say, it's going to count backwards. 45, 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39, etc. So you're going to be able to see in real time your 45 seconds, as I say, going down. So when you see that the 45 seconds are over, the computer is going to take you immediately to the conversation. Now, for example, if you finish before, okay, if you finish reading before the 45 seconds are over and you want to move on directly to the conversation, you can press the button next. Now, I don't recommend you to do that. If you finish to read this passage before the 45 seconds are over, my recommendation would be start writing down on your paper what is going to be your summary of this particular information source. Start writing down, okay, my summary is going to be this one, right? And you start writing down so that later on, when you have time to prepare your response, you're going to be having some elements or some parts of the response already prepared, right? Because you had this free time here because you managed to read faster than 4 or 5 seconds, and you already, well, let's say imagine or write down on your paper some of the lines you're going to mention in your response. So as I say, if you finish reading before the 4 or 5 seconds are over, start making a summary, preparing a summary of what you're going to decide to include in your response about this reading passage, okay? That's what I wanted to tell you. Now, with regard to the question one of your classmates did, let me show you what happens. So when the 4 or 5 seconds are over, when you press the button next, you're going to receive the conversation. And as you can see, the reading passage is not going to be available for you to read it. As you can see, the only thing that is going to be visible to you is going to be this this record. Now, as I told you, you don't have to press on this. It is not
Now
necessary.
listen to two.
Okay. For example, I always press and reproduce here the audios because, of course, this is not the exam. It is a simulator. Nonetheless, on the exam, this is going to happen automatically. You don't have to press anything. When you come to this menu, you're going to listen to a voice in your headphones saying, now you are in the second task, listen to this conversation. As you can listen here, for example, let's listen.
Now listen to two students discussing the article.
Right? So as you can see, everything is automatic. You don't have to press or reproduce anything. But secondly, here, as you can see, you have the opportunity to listen to this particular conversation once, no more than that, okay? And well, as I told you, the reading passage is sadly not going to be available for you. So as I told you, a good idea would be to take notes, right? Let me come back. If you finish reading before the 45 seconds are over, a good idea would be to take notes on this, right? To take notes on this reading passage and to summarize more or less the information that you're going to include in your response, all right? Is that clear, dear Paulina? I think that Paulina was the one who asked, right? Is that clear? It's fine?
Yes, it's clear.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Is there any other question, dear students, any other clarification that I could make? Questions, clarifications? No? Are we fine? No questions? All right. Natalie and Guadalupe say that it's clear. Fantastic. Very good. All right. So I think that there are no more questions. Let's move on. So last thing I want to show you. So when you finish this, as I tell you, when you finish to listen to this, what's going to happen? Well, a new menu, right? And here you're going to have some instructions, but it is not necessary for you to read them anyways, because you know what you have to do, right? It says, anyways, let's read. The woman expresses her opinion about the change described in the article. Briefly summarize the change. As you can see, it's asking you to summarize. Then state her opinion about the change and give the reasons she states for holding that opinion. Again, it's asking you to summarize what she said, not to include your own opinion, but what she said and the arguments she gave, right? As you can see. Fantastic. So 30 seconds to prepare your response, 60 seconds to speak, right? Fantastic. So let me come back here and return to my presentation. Now, some recommendations I have for you before we finalize this class. And tomorrow, as I told you, tomorrow is going to be a merely practical class. We're going to practice for this section together, just as we have done with the first task as well. Okay, so let us see some recommendations I have for you. For this section, dear students, you must be very general, okay, and concise while summarizing both materials you will receive. Nonetheless, if you're going to emphasize one item, as I told you before, let it be in the listening item. Namely, spend more time summarizing the conversation you just listened to. As I told you, it is better for you if you're going to, if you're going to divide your response, let's say, in 20 seconds to speak about one particular information source and 40 seconds to discuss the other one, well, you should definitely spend 40 seconds in discussing the conversation and 20 for the reading, because as I say, the reading is not that important. They care more about the conversation, what the speaker said, what were her arguments, what was her opinion, right? So as I say, please emphasize, pay more attention, and focus your response on the conversation, all right? Secondly, it's not necessary to specifically state what person in the conversation said any specific thing. Avoid expressions as, for example, the woman said this and the man responded this, or he added this and she later said this, okay? As I told you, there are two different speakers, right, in the conversation. And a very common error that some of my students commit is that when they are responding and when they are making a summary of the conversation, they start to mention that interchange of dialogue between two speakers. They say something like, the woman said that she didn't agree with this because it was too expensive. Later, the secondary speaker responded that she agreed with that. Nonetheless, then the conversation returned to the main speaker. So they make that, they mention that change of dialogue between the first speaker or the main speaker and the secondary speaker. But that is not actually something that you should do, because as I say, avoid expressions that are commenting on the change of dialogue, something like she said this, and then the secondary speaker responded this, and then the conversation came back to the main speaker and she said this. and later she responded this. Avoid that. As I say, focus your attention, focus your response only on what the main speaker mentions, and maybe use the expressions given by the other speaker just as supplementary data. As I say, don't mention this interchange dialogue that exists between two speakers. Just focus on what the main speaker says. And if you want to, for example, to make some sort of, let's say, reference to what the secondary speaker said, well, you could use, for example, the information she gave as supplementary data for your response, but no more than that. As I say, don't mention that interchange of dialogue, okay? Focus on what the main speaker says, concentrate yourself to summarize his or her opinion and his arguments for holding that opinion, all right? Is this fine, dear students? Any question about this? Anything that I could clarify here? Questions? No? Questions? Right? So, my last recommendations. It is going to be very important. Okay, thank you very much, dear students, for saying it's clear. So, it's going to be advantageous, dear students, if you prepare your response sheet in an interlude between the first task and the second one, with the outlines you'll follow. Namely, try to write down the first phrase you'll say and your transitions so that you can fill the rest once you receive your material. What do I mean? Let me show you this. This is something that I actually recommended you last time as well. But when you have your blank sheet of paper, before responding to the question, when you have free time, start writing down the structure you're going to be using. As you can see, for example, on this blank sheet of paper, I wrote the template that I used for this task. To begin with, in the reading passage, and I left for me some blank space. Why? Because when I wrote these notes, I didn't know what was the passage that I would be receiving, right? But nonetheless, later, when I listened and when I read, I was able to complete this sheet of paper with all the information I will be mentioning in my response, right? But anyways, this technique of preparing your response with the structure and leaving for you blank space for you to fill it later with the information you received that you're going to include in your response is a very good strategy, because by doing this, you're going to avoid, for example, wasting time when the 30 seconds for your preparation have already started, and also you're going to have your response way more organized and complete, right? So as you can see, write down, please, as I mentioned, your students, the sentences you're going to be, well, of course, using in your response. And by those sentences, I mean, well, the template that we have seen, right? This one. To begin with, in the reading passage, and leave for you some blank space for you to fill that with more information later on, all right? This is something that I recommended you before. Finally, while responding, it may be useful for you to set your eyes on your paper where you have outlined all the points you are going to mention from the material. This way, you're not going to get distracted, nor you will get out of what you had to respond. Now, what do I mean by this, dear students? So when you finish this, right, and you have your sheet of paper ready for you to respond, what you should do is that when you are responding, you should actually place your sheet of paper like this, right? Like looking at it directly, like this. Setting your eyes on your paper. Why? Because if you're going to take the IBT version, a lot of people are going to be around you. And maybe some of them are going to be moving, especially the people who are from ETS and help people with technical issues, etc. So if you respond to the question, let's say looking at to your front, maybe somebody's going to go through the corridors and you're going to get distracted. Nonetheless, if you're setting your eyes on your paper, you're going to be always concentrated and focused on what you have to say, not what is happening around you. So as I say, a good recommendation, something that I used was, as I say, set your eyes on your paper, looking at it directly this way, right? Looking at your paper directly. So you are not going to get distracted and you're going to be always concentrated and reading what you have to say at every single point. All right, that is my last recommendation. Any question, dear students? Anything that I could clarify? Any commentary? Anything? Something that I could repeat? Maybe tell me, please. I'm going to be able, or well, very glad to help you. Anything? Questions, doubts? It's clear. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, dear students. Okay, it's clear. There you are. All right, so if there are no more questions, we're going to stop our class here. I'm going to take your assistance, okay? Please, dear students, don't go. And as I said, tomorrow is going to be a practical class. So please, as I told you before, try to be in a quiet place for you to speak, prepare your microphone, and try to be prepare for our responses because tomorrow we are just going to practice for this task. Okay. So before you go as well, please, dear students, help me with the traditional poll that we always fill. You know that, well, you're always helping me a lot by filling it positively. Okay. So please help me with this response and with the poll. And I'm going to tell you as citizens. Okay. So please listen to your name and say present when I call yours, because it's going to be a huge evidence for you to have your certificate later. So please listen to your names. Where are we? Here. So is here present Guzman Guadalupe?
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much. There, Guadalupe. There you are. What about Sonia Raquel? Sonia has sadly not been able to join us. Nathalie Nair.
Present.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. There you are. What about John Ariel Machaca? Okay, John Ariel is not here. What about Grados Lucia?
Present.
Thank you very much, Lucia. What about Reyes Camila?
Present.
Thank you very much, Camila. There you are. What about Arce Paulina Yasmin?
Present.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. And finally, Alexander Christopher.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Alexander. There you are. Okay. Thank you very much, dear students, for your responses. As I say, a pleasure to be with you tomorrow. Practical classes. Okay, so please be prepared for that. And thank you very much, okay, for your attention and for your presence. See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful night. All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
teacher. Take
teacher.
care.
Have a great
Bye.
night.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, teacher.
Thank you very much. See you later. Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.